about how can I provide value to companies that I'm working with? How can I, cut costs for them? Because at the end of the day, every company is a business. And if you're costing them money and not providing any value in return, there's no point in being associated with you. And that value can be, obviously it can be monetary or, it can be qualitative as well, quantitative or qualitative. And so that's really the mindset that I took into it. I knew that I was on the periphery. I knew that I had to work harder than other people to create that value. And I think ultimately that persistence helps out, but you have to have some talent in there as well. And you have to, I think one of the things about expeditions that I've always said is it's like putting a puzzle together, but it's like putting a puzzle where you actually have to make up the picture too. So you're figuring out the shape of the pieces and then how they fit together.
All right, welcome to another episode of Over a Pint. We are back. On this episode, we focus on the fast-paced and ever-changing world of marketing told through the eyes of folks that are doing it every single day in the trenches. No theory on this show. It is all about real-world practical experience told to you by those that are doing that every single day. So grab a pint of your favorite local brewski or whatever your choice of drink may be and join us for the show. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Pat McGovern, new business director at Acedia, an award-winning digital shop here in Milwaukee. Say hello, Pat.
Hey, everybody.
And I am Kurt Lingle, vice president at Celtic, an award-winning advertising agency, proudly located in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward neighborhood. So, Pat, today's guest is someone that we've talked about, you and I, during our meetings. It's someone that I've wanted to have on the show for a while, and circumstances just kind of came together recently, and we have him here. Today we have Eric Larsen on the Over a Pint Marketing Podcast, and in full transparency, we were talking about this a bit before we hit record. I've known Eric for, I'm going to say 10 or 15 years. We go back quite a way, but Eric's going to share more with us about who he is and what he does, but I would like to boil it down a little bit to give you some foundation about Eric. For 20 plus years, he has been doing some super extreme things, expeditions, from the North Pole to the South Pole to going on top of Mount Everest, and everywhere else in between that you could possibly imagine. He's had encounters with all sorts of shit. Polar bears, extreme cold, thin ice, avalanches. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, not to be cute about it, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. But what's cool about Eric, at the heart of what he does is a true want to expand environmental awareness. And if I could describe Eric in a few words in terms of what he does, and this doesn't define him as a person, but it defines some of what he does. Polar adventurer, expedition guide, educator, filmmaker, author, guest speaker, family man, and one heck of a personal brand builder and promoter. And I've seen him do that through the years as he's really positioned his posture. And I will say, I'd be remiss to say, I'd like to add to that list that one of the many challenges that he's taken on and faced has been cancer recently. So we'd like to talk a little bit about that as well. So it's great to have him back here in the Badger State for a visit. Let's bring him on. Mr. It's Cool to Be Cold himself, Eric Larsen. Eric, welcome to Over a Pint.
Thank you so much. One of the best intros I've ever had by far, hands down.
We try. So Eric, you knew this was coming. It's called Over a Pint for a reason. We like to go around the horn and people share with us what it is they're enjoying. It really doesn't matter what it is. I don't care what it is, but it's usually something local. If you have something, we'll plug it. If not, that's okay too. If you have something for us.
I from Wisconsin, I always joke that we don't drink out of drinking fountains. They're bubblers, and it's not water, but it's Miller High Life. But I unfortunately can't drink much beer anymore after all my treatments and whatnot. It really messes me up. But if I love New Glarus Spotted Cow. And I'm a huge fan of PBR as well. So I had a buddy many, many years ago. He's like, Eric, I'm going to try to get you to drink like good beers or whatever, quote unquote. And I tried to go down the pale ale, all that route, but I'm a man of the people. So I like a good lager and yeah.
That works. That works for me. You are a man of the people. Pat, you are also a man of the people for sure. What do you got for me today?
I've got today I am enjoying a lakefront brewery, La Gosa Rita, which is a margarita style ale. This is one of my faves from lakefront. I just like the taste of this bad boy, so that's what I'm enjoying today. Eric, I'm pumped to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah,
very good.
Sure.
And Eric, I enjoy good PBR too. But I'm one of those. I do enjoy the craft breweries that we have here in town, and we've got a lot of them in Wisconsin. New Glarus is a good one, but this is a brewery up in Sheboygan. I know you know where Sheboygan is. A lot of people don't, but this is a brewery that I'm really digging. It's Three Sheeps. I've been talking about them a lot. They're located up in Sheboygan. I was up there last weekend for the Ice Age Trail Alliance annual meeting. And I brought some of this back with me. This is their offshore West Coast IPA. I love the brewery. I like what they're doing. Good stuff. So, Eric, great to have you on the podcast. Cheers.
Cheers, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into this. So Eric, we got a lot to unpackage here. We got a long way to go and a short way to get there, as they say. But from Cedarburg to literally the North Pole. Share with our listeners, if you could, in a couple of minutes, your elevator speech, your who you are 101. Just lay it on us briefly, if you could, Eric.
Sure. I feel like I don't have a good elevator pitch or founder story, quite honestly. I grew up in Cedarburg. I loved growing up in Cedarburg back in the day. It was a pretty isolated place, both physically and philosophically. I didn't know really much about the world around me, but I did know I like to be outside. I like camping. I like riding my bike. My dad was the director of a nature center, so I spent a lot of time in nature and learning about nature and whatnot. And but I would say I was very much focused on kind of the more adventure side of things, what really drew me in, while I'm interested in all aspects of being outside. And yeah, honestly, I just was interested in doing, I read a lot as well. I read a lot of kind of historical accounts of exploration and adventure and wilderness travel. And so I was always really curious about different areas, and I just really found a lot of joy in being outside and camping and canoe trips and just making up random adventures as a kid, whether it was like just grabbing a map and riding my bike for 60 or 80 miles around southeastern Wisconsin, or wrangling a buddy to canoeing down Cedar Creek. I was just trying to find ways to be outside. And I think, growing up in Wisconsin, one of the things that we have, we don't really have like mountains or oceans or anything like that, but we have good winters. So I always grew up comfortable in winter, and it was honestly that kind of pursuit of really loving winter and being outside and camping as much as I could be that really directed my trajectory.
When I start to hear about your background, and obviously it's one of the things we were going to ask you anyway, how did this get into your DNA? You kind of started to answer it. It's obviously there was a heavy influence on family and what was around you. And obviously, yeah, Wisconsin's a great place. But the one thing that I wasn't planning to ask you unless you got there and you started, what I should have asked is not necessarily how this sense of adventure got into your DNA, but I like where you were going, Eric. It's, the whole cold, the whole winter. And I know that's been a part of, your story and what you're trying to educate so many about. But is that really where it started, where all of a sudden it's like, I'm forced to be in the cold, so I kind of like it? And then as the years went on, you kind of started to uncover there's a bigger story here to share.
Yeah, I never looked at it that I was forced to be in the cold. I never looked at it as a negative thing. I looked at it as just another opportunity to be outside. And so I feel like I had a more positive angle on winter, and I enjoyed Nordic skiing and ice skating. And, that's just what we did. We would walk down to the local rink on a Sunday and play hockey, pond hockey all day, and our feet would be frozen. We'd be exhausted, but we'd be outside no matter what the temperature was and having a blast. So I never really grew up with this idea that cold was bad or that you couldn't go outside. And so that, and I enjoyed it. And so for me, I mean, I love camping in the summertime. I love camping any time of the year, but I was really drawn over time to the kind of the additional challenges of being out in the cold. So I like that. It was another layer of kind of managing everything.
Yeah. So Eric, if Pat McGovern goes to a happy hour and people ask Pat McGovern what he does, or they ask me for that matter, it's like, it's like, I'm an advertising guy, right? Or I'm Pat, I'm in, it's like, I'm in the digital world, and I love the outdoors too. But, it's like, Eric, let's just address it. It's like, you're doing some pretty huge things here. So it's hard to, it's like you're meeting people for the first time. What do you do? It's like, well, it's like, you ever hear of the North Pole? Yeah, I've heard of the North Pole. I did that, Mount Everest. I mean, the things that you take on, and I joke a little bit, but I'm going somewhere. The things that you take on are huge. They're monumental. But I've known you for a good number of years. And some might say, well, does that mean this is a monumental person? Is it superhero-like? I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, I was the slowest kid on my high school soccer team, so I know that I don't have the physical gifts of so many. And I know I wasn't the smartest kid either. So, for better or worse, this is what I got. I try not to lead in with any of that other expedition stuff when I'm out. I'm more of an introvert. And so, if someone asks, I will generally say I'm a professional camper, which is which was always my goal anyway. I just wanted to be outside as much as possible. So it's I don't know. Effort is kind of what maybe distinguishes me, and I'm defined by a lot of different things, and it's changed over the years as well. A big part of my job in the modern age is selling myself nonstop. And so any chance I can get to not talk about myself, oftentimes I prefer actually when I'm out in a more social situation.
Well, and it's kind of I kind of tossed you a little softball lob there. Setting you up. And for everyone listening and watching, that's one of the cool things about Eric. Again, I've known him for many years, and you can kind of get sucked into all the impressive things that he's done. But the thing that's always struck me about Eric and about you, talking to you, Eric, you're here, is just that it's kind of the I don't know if I'm using the right, but it's not the average Joe, but it's like there's just so much empathy. It's like you're just kind of one of the person I'm having a conversation on the bar stool next to, and I think that's what makes it even more impressive. It's the grit, it's the effort, and things like that. So I think that's pretty cool. So if you could, all right, so that a lot of folks are hearing things like, gee, North Pole, South Pole, Everest. This guy is like polar bears. What is this guy taking on? Why don't you let's just address the elephant in the room, maybe share with us one or two of some really cool things you've taken on, so that people can really wrap their brains around the fact, like, okay, this is what he's done.
Totally. Well, I think for me, as I've kind of grown into a professional adventurer, my goal has always been to push the leading edge of adventure. And part of that is, realistically, we're not discovering new places anymore on planet Earth. People have been everywhere. It's mapped, so on and so forth. So, but there still is an opportunity to really kind of explore, but it's more in this personal way, and it's pushing our human kind of limits in these spaces. And so part of that is trying to do traditional expeditions or adventures in a harder style or a more pure aesthetic. And part of that is kind of combining these different elements together to make a series of things much more difficult. And then ultimately for me, it's a lot about creativity, being original. I don't want to follow the track of other people. I want to do something that hasn't been done before. And so those are the kind of the elements that are swirling around in my head at any given moment. And so, as a result, way back in the day, we did the first ever summer expedition to the North Pole, which we spent 3 years just planning and preparing for that particular trip. And that was a real incredible experience for me, so difficult. In 2010, I did an expedition to the South Pole, North Pole, on top of Everest all in 1 year, which has never been done previously and will most likely never be done again. And I tried to ride my bike to the South Pole, which at the time had never been done. And then also, I think a big part of that leading edge of adventure is in storytelling. And so in 2014, we did an unsupported expedition to the North Pole, which isn't so much about being first now, but it's also about being last, but then also documenting that trip in a real, authentic way to be able to share that experience with other people.
Hey, Eric, I got a question for you. In what I'm picking up is you have a love for the outdoors. You have a love for the adventure, which is totally cool. At what point in your life did you realize it's like, hey, I love doing this stuff, and this could be a business for me, right? This could be something that I can make a living at. How did that come about?
I mean, I would like to know when that happens, actually, if I could make a living at it. My definition of what success and how to support myself off of this has changed quite a bit as time has gone on. And I think my vision was maybe like a historical vision of what historical explorers may have done, which is you do this big trip that hasn't been done before, and you hopefully can write a book, and then somehow that supports you. And that was kind of my initial vision and dream. I had no idea how to achieve that. I mean, that's what I thought about when I was 20. And I was just like working in the bike shop all summer long and going to school. That's what my vision was, but I had no path of how to achieve that. And as I got closer and closer to that goal, what I realized was it's an impossible goal. And I've had to evolve and change over time and add on different things to support myself, which in one sense is really achieving that goal, but in a more modern way, I would say. But it's been my vision since I was a kid to be able to do expeditions full time. And again, growing up in Wisconsin, there wasn't any sort of, way, like there wasn't a course that you could take. There weren't any mentors that I had. There weren't people around. There weren't organizations that were helping you. There wasn't, easy access to information. You had a National Geographic magazine with some pictures, and that was about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great question, Pat, and it's a great answer, Eric. And this kind of transitions it a little bit. I mean, what you're describing, Eric, is, you are an entrepreneur. There's definitely entrepreneurship in you in terms of what you're doing. It's your business. As many business owners do, entrepreneurs, they figure it out as they go. A lot of folks don't necessarily have the magical plan in the desk drawer. They have a passion, they have an idea, and sometimes things get figured out when they're at sea sailing versus sitting in the port and trying to figure the best plan, before they sail. That kind of leads into the marketing side of things. I mean, this is a marketing podcast, and I think, we wanted to talk about this. I know you were saying earlier on, it's like, you've been kind of you described yourself maybe years ago as an introvert, whatever, but I mean, you've built, I've known you, and I think you are a great brand promoter of yourself. And I've seen what you've been able to do over the years in terms of build the Eric Larsen brand, promote it, network. Networking is a word that seems to come up a lot on our show. And it's some people look at networking as this dirty word, and it's like, it's not. It's relationships. You're here and I'm here with you today because we've been able to continue the relationship and network over the years. Talk about that a little bit, because I'm impressed by what you've done as you built your brand. Can you talk a little bit about that and the strategies and the hurdles and all that's involved?
There's a few things there, and I'll say one of my mantras, which I have a lot. And the first one is the best, and you kind of hinted at this a little bit, but the best way to be successful is to not have another choice. And so if you have a dream or a goal that you want bad enough, for me, I put myself in a situation where I don't have another choice. This is the only way out. Additionally, I think most people would have looked at what I was doing for a long time, 15 years, as brinksmanship, pursuing a path when all the data is suggesting that you not go down that road. And so as a result, what I find one of the keys to success is, and success in marketing and kind of being a professional at what I do, is just persistence, like it's just that being able to keep moving forward regardless of all the obstacles. But ultimately for me, what I realized early on in my career is that our expeditions were prohibitively expensive. The budget for polar travel is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had none of that money. And so right away, I realized that we were going to need to fundraise to be able to support those expeditions. I also understood as a normal human being that people aren't just giving people money to do things or whatever it is. And so as a result, I realized right away that I needed to create value. We were doing these expeditions that were prohibitively expensive in terms of kind of the spectrum of adventure and adventure marketing. It was on the periphery, it was on the edge. And so as a result, I had to kind of look at it in a different way. Not that I was the most important thing and people should feel lucky to support me, but more about how can I provide value to companies that I'm working with? How can I, cut costs for them? Because at the end of the day, every company is a business. And if you're costing them money and not providing any value in return, there's no point in being associated with you. And that value can be, obviously it can be monetary or, it can be qualitative as well, quantitative or qualitative. And so that's really the mindset that I took into it. I knew that I was on the periphery. I knew that I had to work harder than other people to create that value. And I think ultimately that persistence helps out, but you have to have some talent in there as well. And you have to, I think one of the things about expeditions that I've always said is it's like putting a puzzle together, but it's like putting a puzzle where you actually have to make up the picture too. So you're figuring out the shape of the pieces and then how they fit together. And so for better or worse, I've always had a good kind of broader picture vision process where I can see how different pieces relate. And so trying to get, and you mentioned networking, and it's kind of networking on all different levels. And so trying to find how all those pieces are together. And I think additionally, I've also been open to new ideas. And I mentioned creativity earlier. I'm always trying to look at how I can improve what I'm doing, whether it's a presentation, whether it's an expedition, website, social media, whatever it is. Not where I'm just following any sort of trend. And then also trying to be creative that aligns with me and my values. One of my things now that I often say as the world is changing so quickly is one of my mantras is just stay true to yourself. Like I could easily be chasing my tail in one way or the other, or this kind of shiny new object. And, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. And so I just kind of stay true to myself and try to keep on that path. But and then lastly, I'll say is the word brand, like personal brand. I'm an individual, and so I think that's the other part for me that's been beneficial for the most part. Although I'm sure that there's some negative aspects to that. I don't look at myself as a brand. I'm a human being, and I'm trying to communicate what I'm about with other people. And so I think when people perceive themselves as a brand, you get in this kind of circular loop where you are trying to you want people to perceive you in a certain way versus who you are. And so you just get down this rabbit hole of becoming something that you're not, I feel like. And so for me, I just try to stay true to myself. I follow my interests, which to my wife's chagrin, I always say if it costs money and wastes time, I'm usually pretty interested in it. So, but I get lucky, I get lucky. And so money isn't my motivating factor, but as a result of following my interests and working hard, that Midwest work ethic, you just try to outwork everybody and outconnect everybody. And hopefully if you can stick with it long enough, if you can kind of weather all the storms, all the pitfalls, all the living in my buddy's basement when I was 37 years old and all my friends had houses and families, like dreams cost. It's not an easy path.
Hey, Eric, thank you. That's super interesting. So I really like too the part you're touching on with adding value to the other brands that you're working with. Could you just talk to us a little bit about like how you would go about that? I mean, what was that process like? Would you say, okay, I'm planning on an expedition. These are the brands I would love to work with. Was it a matter of just picking up the phone or, your laptop and emailing them or cold calling them and saying, hi, my name's Eric Larsen. Here's what I would like to do. What do you think? Just how did that process? Just can you give us a little bit of insight behind the curtain on that?
Well, I'll tell you, the process started 25 years ago, quite honestly, because I get contacted by a lot of younger people, like, how can I get sponsored? And one of my first things I say is, don't get sponsored. Take 10 years and become really good at something. And so, when I first started out, the conversation about a sponsorship or anything that might come to me wasn't even on the table. I was doing things to gain experience and knowledge and see new things. And so it wasn't until I had done, kind of grown my own personal experience that I even thought about that. And then ultimately, I realized that, we had fundraised, in 2002, we started fundraising for this Summer North Pole expedition. We spent 3 years doing that. And then the expedition, we built a website and it was awesome. We were on the Tonight Show and blah, blah, blah. And we got done. And then all that stuff was over. But I realized, I spend a lot of the year outside. I'm doing all these other expeditions and adventures besides this one thing every 3 years. And I thought, man, there must be some value to companies in that, in some of these other things that I'm doing. And it was also the time when social media was starting to come online. And I remember in 2008, we were married then, but I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to try to get a sponsorship for a year because I'm already doing all these things. And she was kind of like, it doesn't seem like a good idea. And so I just reached out to a company that I had a connection with through one of the sales team at OR, Stanley. And they were my first partner, and it was amazing. And I didn't really ask for anything besides some products. And so if I can, my MO, and it's so different now, but I'm still on that same track. But my MO is if I can get some sort of personal connection to a company, if I can have a meeting, if I can do a presentation, but ultimately it's just like, can I do something for them that gives them value first? Can I show them that they're saving money? And that's what I did with Stanley. I took some products out. I took them all over the world and sent them some great images that they were able to use in their marketing and whatnot. And it wasn't until after that I was like, okay, well, here's what I've provided. Now let's look at how I can do this on a more long-term basis. And so that's really my process. But even to this day, I'm still like value first. So it's funny. I think a lot of younger people would disagree with my approach, but I find I don't want to say like I'm a broken watch or anything. But I find that it still works, is kind of that effort first and providing that value as well.
Eric, there's a lot of business lessons in there, and I know I like how you described. You said, I'm a human first. I don't look at myself as a brand, but I will say this: as someone that's listening in, someone that's been a brand practitioner his entire life, someone who consults businesses, there was a lot of lessons in there that you shared as it relates to you personally that a lot of businesses could learn from. Couple that just stick out. One is, be true to yourself. Brands need to be authentic and true to who they are. And the most successful brands are the ones that do that. And also the ones that listen and understand who their audience is and provide value. So I think there's a lot going on there, which I think is relevant. I'd be remiss now if I didn't talk a little bit about another one of your challenges. And obviously, you've taken on a lot, Eric. Again, as we go through I don't want to call it superhero-like because you don't like that word, but the things that you've taken on, the challenges, it's for many, it's a lot to wrap their brains around. But then a real big one came your way in cancer. Could you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, that was the curveball. In January of 2021, I believe, January 2021, I was packing up to drive over to northern Minnesota to do one of my polar training courses. And that fall, I hadn't really felt that well. I kind of was very lethargic and just didn't feel right. And I went through I thought I might be allergic to some foods or whatever. Anyway, I ended up getting a colonoscopy right in the first couple of days of 2021, and woke up and my wife was there and the doctor was there, and they're like, you have cancer. And that's kind of the needle scratch that changes everything. Just that word is crazy to hear, and we all know that. And we all know somebody that has cancer or has been touched by cancer in some way. But unless it's you, and I'm saying this because I've been on both sides of it, unless it's you that's hearing that news, it's a completely different thing. And I was initially diagnosed as stage 4 colorectal cancer. And, the prognosis was you've got 4 years to live. And that was it. And at that time, I didn't really think about the North Pole or Everest or anything like that. I just thought, like, how can I get another day with my kids? That was my only thought. And luckily, I got connected to a really great doctor who actually had worked in Madison for some time. And he's like, hey, I know it looks like you have cancer in your lungs, and it probably is, but there's a lot of people from Wisconsin that I dealt with where some stuff shows up in your lungs that's not cancer, and maybe you could get that checked out. And so I had a couple different biopsies and finally got this other procedure where they went in through my side and deflate your lung and cut a piece out. And luckily it wasn't cancer. And so that changes the conversation quite a bit. And they're talking about a cure, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get cured, but that's the path that they're working on. And so ultimately, my prognosis was downgraded to 3B, which is still pretty intense. And so I went through a year and a half of brutal chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and just some insane times afterwards. And am still kind of, recovering from that tumble and just mess of an experience. And I have a lot of PTSD from all that as well. But I'm moving forward as well too. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So Eric, here we are today. Obviously we have a glimpse, our listeners have a glimpse of, what life was like 20 some years ago in terms of what you've done and what you were doing. And now here we are today. How has that? Talk to us now, fast forward to today. So what does life look like? How have the priorities have changed? How have your priorities changed? Or how you look at, I don't know what the right word is, the way you approach what you're doing, the business, finding that why, what's different from maybe when I first met you 15 years ago at an outdoor retailer show and you were telling me about who you are and what you do. How would that conversation look like today if I met you for the first time? I mean, maybe share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I always used to say about a big expedition, those are life-changing things, and we're pushed the edge physically and mentally. And, I would come back from those trips forever changed, but also pretty much the same person as well. And there are a lot of similarities between cancer and these big expeditions and kind of dealing with everything. I drew on a lot of my expedition experience. That being said, I think I'm more changed after this experience. And as I mentioned, like when I first got diagnosed, I wasn't thinking about any of those adventures or like, this guy, what's got two thumbs and is awesome. I was just thinking about my family, and, I thought about my legacy being the times when I've helped other people out. And so I do feel, and I think that physical kind of roller coaster that I've been on, I'm still kind of getting my mojo back, and my body just isn't the same that it used to be. And as a result, my mind has changed, and I still have these ongoing challenges with my digestion. I had 14 inches of my colon removed, and so I'm just dealing with a bunch of that stuff. And so as I move forward, that kind of desire to be number one, it's still there a little bit. Like if I sit in my quiet moments, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to be the best. And that was my, 15 years ago, I wanted to be the number one guy in my pursuit. And not because I wanted people to look at me and be like, oh, he's the best. I was just motivated internally to do as big and as hard and as long trips that were pushing myself as much as possible. And now that desire it's chopped down a little bit, and there's a little bit in there, and I have some things that I'm working on, but I think more so I look at, the value of an individual of society is not necessarily about me reaching to the next thing on a personal level, but really using my knowledge and my experience, which I think has value, and lifting other people up and bringing people along on that journey. And so that's, I feel like, what I'm more focused on as well now, as well as just kind of being around for my kids. I was just out kicking the soccer ball with my son last night after dinner, and it was just like, man, this is an awesome experience, because I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. And so I've always appreciated the small moments, because on an expedition you have so few things, but I feel it much more now.
One of the things I appreciate about the way you've told stories over the years, and in particular, like a lot of times when I think about guest speaking, Eric, you've always been able to, since I've known you and I've had the privilege of listening to you speak, obviously there can be a tendency to get caught up in the adventure. And I think a lot of people enjoy hearing the adventure, but the thing that I've always liked is how you were able to take that story and make it relatable to me or to whomever it might be who's in the audience. And what does that mean in my everyday world? And obviously we do want to hear about, the explorations, but you find a way to say, you know what, but here's a couple lessons, and this is how it can apply to your everyday world, whatever it is you do. It doesn't matter what your occupation, what your life looks like. Here's a few lessons. And I would imagine, that's probably something that's going to probably become even stronger. It's a talent you're going to have that will even get more strong based on the experiences that you've been able to share. So we've got, as I like to say, we've got a local kid coming home soon. So a local cheesehead. I want to talk, let's talk a little bit about, right now, Eric's in Colorado. I'm assuming he's not here yet, but he's coming to Wisconsin soon. And let's talk about what you got going on, Eric, and it's pretty exciting. Why don't you share with us when you're coming in and what this is all about? Plug it.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of public speaking all over for, I always say anything from kindergartners to CEOs, and I have another gig over in the Madison area. And so I kind of have another philosophy, which is have fun and do good. And so I want to be able to try to help out where I can. And, there's a nature center where actually my dad was a director. My sister, it's almost a family business. My sister's the president of the board of directors at River Edge Nature Center, which is in Newburgh, Wisconsin. So an iconic place in Cedarburg, and a place, or in southeastern Wisconsin, and a place that I spent a lot of time as a kid in summer camps and just loving being out. And so I'm doing a presentation on May 10th at the county fairgrounds at the pavilion there, and a fundraiser for River Edge. And so it's a way for me to have some fun, share some stories, and also help out an organization that I feel really helped me out. I think there are, as you mentioned before, there's a lot of lessons that are valuable to us all from being outside. And it doesn't have to be skiing in the North Pole. It can just be a quiet walk, or a day bird watching, or a canoe trip down the Milwaukee River, whatever it is, anything in between. And I think nature is the exception now, and so kind of supporting these organizations that help facilitate this connection in nature in whatever way you want to get it, I think has a lot of value, and I want to try to do my part to support that and increase access and have more people have that experience, because I do feel like that has a lot of value in our lives, and whether that's a healthier mind, a healthier body, greater connections to other people, whatever it is.
So it's on May 10th, obviously, and 6 to 9. What can folks expect? What other exciting things are going on? Is there? You're speaking.
Does there need to be anything else? Come on.
No, there doesn't. We could end there.
No,
I will say it's a cool place.
Yeah, and so I'm just trying to, draw on some of my connections and help out. And so we'll be doing a silent auction with a lot of gear and things donated from a lot of local companies, as well as just some of my kind of more brands and international brands that I work with. So just trying to raise some additional funds for River Edge. I'll have my books that I'll be selling and donating all the proceeds to River Edge and signing those. I'll be just hanging out. I'll probably drink a beer while I'm there, even though it'll mess me up for a couple days. That's fine. I don't care. It's worth it. And then I'm just going to do a presentation, and I really enjoy doing these slideshows or whatever you want to call them. I'm a photographer, so I have a lot of great pictures. I like having a little fun as well. I don't necessarily take myself too seriously, but I'm not a clown. It's not all entertainment. There's some inspiration there and some education too. So it's been a fun ride for me over the past 20 years. And like you said, there are some great takeaways that I'm not trying to be up on a soapbox, but I'm an average guy with not the biggest muscles. And I've been able to kind of use some of those lessons myself to get through all these challenges, both physically and philosophically over the years. And so I think there's value in that as well. But ultimately, it's drink some brewskis, celebrate southeastern Wisconsin, talk about snow, ice, and cold, and raise money for a great organization, River Edge Nature Center.
Yeah. So, folks, if you are in the Wisconsin area, southeastern Wisconsin, Wisconsin in general, May 10th, all roads lead to the Ozaki Pavilion at the County Fairgrounds in Cedarburg. It's going to be a great event. I think you're right. It's a good cause. I'm very familiar with the River Edge Nature Center. It's a cool place. It's a good cause. I think there's going to be a lot of value. I've heard Eric speak before. It sounds exciting. There's a lot of cool intel, just fascinating stories. If you haven't had a chance to meet Eric, see Eric, listen to Eric speak, you need to do it. And if you have heard him before, see him again, because it's worth it. And he's a super relatable person, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about Eric. Eric, as we start to wrap things up here, as we always like to do, and you just did a great job promoting this really cool event, and we'll promote it some more when this podcast posts. Final words always go to our guests. So, I mean, is there anything else you want to share with us? Anything that we didn't talk about that you think about and say, hey, I wish they would have asked me this, or whatever it might be? The stage is yours, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level for me, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my story. I love my connection to Wisconsin. I got to say, there's not too many days that go by where I don't tell people I love growing up in southeastern Wisconsin and Cedarburg, and, and just kind of, I'm a Midwest guy. I may live in Colorado, but I have Midwest sensibilities. And I think that goes a long way in being a great human being, in business, in marketing, and everything in between. And I think for me, I'm still focused on some big expeditions, but I'm also working on programs that are helping others. And, I've got this great BIPOC polar training scholarship that I'm working on. And I think ultimately my message for everyone and kind of my last words is that adventure is everywhere. It doesn't have to be climbing Mount Everest or skiing to the poles. It can be in your backyard. And if you get outside, you're going to benefit in some way.
Awesome. Folks, there you have it. This was another episode of Over a Pint with Eric Larsen. Eric, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, sharing some time with us, and it's been cool to reconnect with you and get caught up. And I'm excited for what's to come and all the things you have going on. I mean that genuinely. So on that note, thanks everyone. Cheers.